It is the fall, and you know what that means. College basketball season is upon us. Hello, everyone. I'm Tom Seipp, a college basketball analyst here at TWSN. Last year, you saw all throughout the season me giving my top 25 each and every week, and that will return this year. And that's, of course, we'll start with my preseason top 25, which I'll show you in a moment. You might have seen me doing a few interviews with a lot of players so far this offseason, a few team breakdowns as well, and we're really excited here at TWSN to provide a lot of content here this college basketball season. Of course, it all starts with a preseason ranking. My ranking is a little bit different than most, so it'll be exciting to see here in a moment. I'm going to go through each and every team, 1 to 25. 1 through 10 will be a little bit more in depth. Then as we continue to go on, it'll be shorter and shorter. But again, a really, really exciting season is upon us. I'm really looking forward to it to begin, as my number one overall team this winter will be the Houston Cougars. That's a lot different than a lot of other people have, but listen, I really like this Houston team. After making the Elite Eight just a year ago, they did lose Kyler Edwards, Taze Moore, a few other pieces as well, but they return Marcus Sasser and Tremont Mark, and they're both back and healthy. Sasser, he could be a first-team All-American this year. He averaged 18 points a game last year, and Mark, fully healthy, will have a huge impact for Houston. And this team doesn't have really too many weaknesses. Their defense obviously is unbelievable under the great head coach Kelvin Sampson, and this team has brought in a lot of great talent this year, including Jerice Walker. He's a freshman who will be probably a starting forward for Houston this winter. Now, the only issue for Houston will probably be its shooting. Having Sasser back will be huge for Houston offensively, but the Cougars will need a lot of other players to step up from beyond the arc. Now, Houston, obviously, they play in the AAC, maybe not the best conference in college basketball, multiple bid league, but still not the best, especially for a number one overall seed. And their non-conference schedule doesn't help out too much. They play a middle of November, a Sunday night game in Eugene, Oregon, against the Oregon Ducks, but they have that game. They play St. Mary's in Texas. They do host Alabama, and the only other true road game, along with Oregon, is they do go to Virginia as well, but that's really it. Not too strong of a schedule for Houston. So it's going to be really important for them to capitalize on those opportunities in the early season. My number 2 team this year will be the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Each and every year, they're up atop of the rankings, and last year was another year without a national championship for the Bulldogs. And I did lose Chet Holmgren and Andrew Nembhard, but those were the only 2 players that they lost from last year's roster. They bring everyone back, including Drew Timme, who is always a National Player of the Year candidate. They got a great transfer in Malachi Smith from Chattanooga. He is a huge addition for Gonzaga, especially offensively. A player to watch for is definitely Julian Strother, who has taken a massive leap already for Gonzaga, and I expect that leap to continue coming in to this winter. Their non-conference schedule is pretty stacked. Obviously, they also don't play in the best conference in basketball, but their non-conference schedule is loaded. They play Michigan State, Baylor, Alabama, and Kentucky, all on neutral sites. They have a true road game at Texas, completing the home-and-home series that they started a year ago. And they also are participating in the Phil Knight Legacy Tournament, which is always a packed tournament. So while the conference schedule will be a breeze for Gonzaga, as always, the non-conference schedule won't be. So it will be very important for Mark Few's team to start off on the right foot. So now number 3, we'll look at the North Carolina Tar Heels, the national runner-up from last year's NCAA tournament, and what a magical end to last season it was for UNC. They had a great win at Duke in Coach K's final home game, and then just parlaying that into momentum in the NCAA tournament, just falling short of a national championship. And from that national championship team, they returned 4 starters. Caleb Love, Armando Bacot, RJ Davis, and Leaky Black are all back for UNC. The only player that left was Brady Manick, who ran out of eligibility, but they replaced him with Pete Nance, who was a huge player at Northwestern last year, and I expect his impact to be huge for the Tar Heels this winter. UNC played, again, fantastic at the end of the season. 13-3 in the final 2 months. Such an impressive way to end the season. And it's going to be really important for them to just shut off the noise coming into this year. Again, they're ranked in the top 3 in virtually every single poll, but they have to continue to just focus on playing their game like they did in the NCAA tournament. Their non-conference games include the Phil Knight Invitational. Again, another great out-of-conference tournament. They also play at Indiana this year, and then they do play against Ohio State and Michigan on neutral sites before playing ACC conference ball. My number 4 team will be the Kentucky Wildcats, and what a disappointing season or end to the season it was for Coach Calipari, losing to St. Peter's as a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament. But not often do you get back the National Player of the Year, and that's exactly what Kentucky did, bringing back Oscar Tshiebwe this winter. Now, while Kentucky didn't make too many moves in the transfer portal, didn't get that many freshmen, it was a unique offseason for Kentucky as they didn't bring in too much talent this winter. They kind of do in a sense, as CJ Frederick, who was a transfer from Iowa a year ago, is going to be healthy and miss the entirety of last season with an injury. So he could be a huge addition for Coach Calipari, maybe the biggest addition for a team in the country this year if he is fully healthy and played like he did for the Hawkeyes just 2 years ago. They do lose a lot. Ty Washington and Kellen Grady, who were both stars, played a lot of minutes, are both gone. They're going to have to rely on their returners again, like Oscar Tshiebwe, like CJ Frederick, and Jacob Toppin is definitely a guy that should be on everyone's radar, just like his brother Obi, continuing to blossom as he continues to get older, and he's gotten better as each year has gone on. In his first 2 years at Kentucky, he also played his freshman year at Rhode Island. He's just continued to get better and better, so he is someone to definitely keep an eye on. My number 5 team will be the Duke Blue Devils. Duke made the Final Four last year, but only get one guy back from that team in Jeremy Roach. 4 top players in the country out of this high school class leads to the number 1 recruiting class in the country for the Duke Blue Devils. That's Kyle Filipowski, Derek Lively, who's great defensively and will be huge for John Shire on the defensive side of things. Tariq Whitehead and Mark Mitchell will round out those top 4 freshmen. Those all 4 players should be starting players for Duke. Now, it wasn't only the high school recruits that Shire got. He went to the transfer portal as well, getting Jacob Grayson, who was big in Illinois a year ago. Really, the last 2 years, he was fantastic, and he'll be big off the bench for John Shire. Now, I have Duke a little bit higher than most. I'm trusting John Shire maybe a little bit more than most. It's going to be a huge test for him now, coming in, replacing the great Coach K. It'll be a big year 1 with all these great recruits that he got. At number 6, it is Creighton. Creighton, I have projected to win the Big East this year, and the end of last season was incredible for the Blue Jays. And they're looking to parlay that success this season under Greg McDermott, who is such a great coach, entering his 13th season. Ryan Nembhard and Trey Alexander are probably the most underrated duo in all of college basketball. They were fantastic at the end of last season for Creighton, and that's why they've continued to get all this hype surrounded around this team. Nembhard and Alexander were fantastic. Kalkbrenner, Sharif Mitchell, and Nembhard all being healthy are so big for the Blue Jays this year, as they dealt with so many injuries throughout the entire season last year. Arthur Kaluma, should also take a big leap in his sophomore year after averaging double digits a year ago. This is a really complete team for Creighton. It's probably one of the best rosters that Creighton has ever had. Creighton last year was so good defensively, but struggled offensively at times, which is very unique for a team playing under Greg McDermott. So if they continue to take that step forward offensively, this could be, again, one of the best teams in the country and vying for a national championship. But it all starts with the guard play of Ryan Nembhard and Trey Alexander. And again, I truly believe that this is one of the most underrated duos in all of college basketball. So Greg McDermott, everyone was saying how great his coaching job was a year ago. He brings everyone back, and it's a big year for McDermott and Creighton in the middle of America in Omaha. At number 7, it's UCLA, and what a job Mick Cronin has done in his first few years with the Bruins. UCLA, of course, had that magical run 2 years ago, making it all the way to the Final Four. The expectations were so high a year ago, and they played pretty well. Obviously, they went down in the Sweet 16, and people considered that a disappointment. But coming into this year, they lose Juzang, they lose Cody Rowley, they lose Jules Bernard, but Jaime Jaquez comes back, and fourth-year starter Tiger Campbell is also back for UCLA, and they are going to be huge leaders for the Bruins as they have a fantastic freshman class coming in that includes Amari Bailey and Adam Bona. Both of them should be starters for UCLA just beginning at the beginning of the season. Bailey and fourth-year starter Tiger Campbell will be a fantastic guard play to watch, as the season progresses. Jalen Clark will definitely be the X factor for UCLA this season, though. I have TCU at number 8. TCU is really not that high on a lot of people's boards, but TCU had such an interesting year last year. They had a lot of big wins, and they almost beat number 1 Arizona in the NCAA tournament last year. Again, they almost knocked them off, had a fantastic season, and they bring back virtually everyone from that roster. And of course, that includes Mike Miles, who comes back, and he could win Big 12 Player of the Year this year. Eddie Lampkin was dominant in that game against Arizona. He's someone to definitely keep an eye on this entire season. But TCU, they don't have a great non-conference schedule. But the conference schedule, of course, in the Big 12 is stacked. So it'll be important for TCU to begin the season on the right foot, as once it becomes conference play, it's going to be very huge for TCU to continue to win. At number 9, I have Indiana, and I truly believe that this is finally really the year for Mike Woodson at Indiana. I believe that he'll finally put it all together. Trace Jackson Davis and Xavier Johnson are back for Coach Woodson, and they will be two great veteran leaders for him. They bring in a lot of freshmen, including Jalen Hood-Schifino, who will probably be a starter for Mike Woodson and Indiana, along with Malik Renew. They went to high school together at Montverde Academy. They will probably both play a lot of minutes for the Hoosiers this year. They're probably the Big Ten favorite as well. Like last year, they don't really have that many early tests, though, in the non-conference schedule. They do host UNC, and they are at Xavier, but that's really about it. So it'll be really interesting to see how Indiana plays throughout the entire season, as really it's a down year for the Big Ten. After we saw really 2-3 years of the Big Ten producing a lot of high talent, a lot of great teams, it's a down year for the Big Ten this upcoming season. So it'll be important for Indiana to maybe capitalize on, if not both of those games, against UNC and Xavier. At number 10, we have the Tennessee Volunteers, and it really appears that Rick Barnes is finally finding his groove at Tennessee. He returns a lot of players from last year's SEC Tournament Championship team. 4 of 5 starters come back, with that 5th starter for this year likely being Julian Phillips, who is coming in as a freshman, and he has been, the reviews have been raving about the freshman in Phillips. So this should be a very good year for the Vols. At number 11, it's Arkansas. And Arkansas is a very, very, very interesting team to watch for this season. Eric Musselman has had a fantastic first 3 years at Arkansas, and the expectations are high yet again in 2022. Only 2 players are back from Arkansas's fantastic season a year ago, but they bring in the number 2 recruiting class in the country. 6 top 100 recruits are here for the Razorbacks, and those include the great Anthony Black, Jordan Walsh, and Nick Smith Jr., and all 3 of them are expected to be starters and expected to play very well for Arizona. The other freshmen include Darian Ford, who should be a sleeper, whatnot. Of course, in a great freshman class, Ford hasn't been talked about as much, but he could be an X factor for the Razorbacks. And just rounding out that top 100 class that we were just talking about, Joseph Pinion and Barry Dunning will also play big roles for Arkansas. Arkansas also had a big transfer come in, which was Ricky Council from Wichita. Council has been fantastic playing for Wichita State, and really he could be an NBA player. There's some who believe that. When I was going through a lot of the evaluations, Council could be someone who could be incredibly good and incredibly valuable for this very young Arkansas team. He'll probably come off the bench, but he could be very big for Arkansas. And, we talk about this raw talent, this young roster. We'll get to know if they're good very early on, playing in a loaded Maui tournament. It's a loaded field, and they could play Creighton in the second round if both win their first round matchups. And what a game that would be. At number 12, I have San Diego State, and boy, I am so high on this team. Brian Detro has done a great job building his program in San Diego, and I believe that this is the year he finally makes a splash. He returns three seniors, three great seniors in Nathan Mesa, Matt Bradley, and Adam Seco. They all return. They got a huge transfer in Darian Trammell from Seattle, who averaged about 17 points per game a year ago. This is a big year for San Diego State. Last year, we know how fantastic they were defensively, but offensively, they struggled at times. And there's a strong belief that throughout this summer, they improved offensively and they can finally put it together. And if they do, they will be one of the best teams in the entire country. At number 13, I have Xavier. Now, Xavier, I was so high on them throughout the entire year last year, but they had an epic collapse at the end of Big East regular season play, and they missed the NCAA tournament after being ranked for the majority of the season, but they rebounded in a big way in the postseason, winning the NIT championship. And from that roster last year, they bring back everyone but Scruggs, and they add Sean Miller, the fantastic head coach from Arizona. Again, they return so many great players. Adam Kunkel, Fremantle, Jack Nunji, you name it. They have returned. Xavier, again, so good offensively. They also added Sully Baum from UTEP, who averaged 20 points a game last year. Prolific scoring guard. He'll be huge for Xavier. So Xavier, the team I have second in the Big East. At number 14, I have Baylor. I'm not as high on the Baylor Bears as a lot of others are, but they do return a lot of players, including Adam Flagler and L.J. Cryer. Flo Thamba also comes back. He will be healthy at the beginning of this year. They also have the McDonald's All-American, who will be very big for Scott Drew, and Keontae George. He should start and play a big role for the Bears this season. And also, Baylor also went to the transfer portal and got Jalen Bridges from West Virginia. He's someone to keep an eye on throughout Big 12 play. Speaking of Big 12 play, the reigning champs, Kansas Jayhawks, come in at number 15. They're the reigning national champions. They only bring back two key players in DeJuan Harris and Jalen Wilson, but they added Kevin McCullough, a big piece from Texas Tech. It's a great addition for Bill Self. They have a few of other freshmen coming in as well. They have three McDonald's All-Americans in Grady Dick, Ernest Yuta, and MJ Rice. They should all be key contributors, for the Jayhawks this season. At number 16, I have Nate Oates and Alabama. Nate Oates has done a great job in the portal, adding two veterans in Mark Sears and Dominic Welsh. Sears coming from Ohio and Dom Welsh coming from St. Bonaventure. Two veterans who are both very good role players and will be huge for Alabama, who struggled at times, especially with their guard depth. And with Javon Quinley out for the vast majority of the beginning of the season, Sears and Welsh could be very big for this Alabama team. They bring in two great freshmen in Brandon Miller and Jaden Bradley, both McDonald's All-Americans. They will both likely start. So this is a big year for Nate Oates headed into this 2022-23 season. We'll, again, know if they're good very early on in November, as they're also participating in the Phil Knight Invitational. They also have a few other good non-conference games. They play Gonzaga on a neutral site I mentioned earlier. That game will be in Alabama. It's just not on their home court. And they're also going to Houston, who, of course, I ranked number 1. So two very good tests right there, along with the Phil Knight Invitational for number 16, Alabama. At number 17, it's Auburn. They were so good last year, and Bruce Pearl has continued to build this program. He only lost two players last year. Those two players were Jabari Smith and Walker Kessler. Now, while they might be big names, he immediately replaced them with Johnny Broom from Morehead State and Johan Tahore, who is a McDonald's All-American, and they will both immediately slide into their spots in the starting rotation. Auburn will always be in the mix in the SEC as long as Bruce Pearl is their head coach. And number 18, it's Texas. Now, Texas last year was a team I was so high on. They had so many great talented players coming in, but they just couldn't get it to work. But I really trust in Chris Beard. While he lost a lot, he also added a lot, including Tyrese Hunter, who was fantastic at Iowa State a year ago. Just like last year, they're probably a top 10 team talent-wise. They bring back, Marcus Carr and Timmy Allen. This might be the year for Texas to make a run. At number 19, I have the Florida Gators. They have a new coach in Tom Golden coming from San Francisco. San Francisco had a great year last year, and Golden, a very good and respected head coach out on the West Coast, now comes down to Florida to coach in the SEC. He returned a lot of players, including Colin Castleton, Kwesi Reeves, Myron Jones. They'll all be back for Florida, but also add a lot of players from the transfer portal. Kyle Lofton from St. Bonaventure, Will Richard from Belmont, Alex Fudge from LSU as well. Those three players should all start for Florida. I expect them to bounce back after a rough season last year. Again, last year they started off really well, just couldn't get it to go in SEC play. I expect them to be back in a big way this season. At number 20, I have Arizona. Now, Arizona was a number one seed in the NCAA tournament a year ago. I really personally never believed in them. Now they have a roster with Dalen Terry's gone, Christian Coloco's gone, and Ben Mathurin is also gone. So who will be the guy who will step up for Arizona? They added Courtney Ramey from Texas and also Cedric Henderson from Campbell, a very good scoring option as well. But this is a huge year for Tommy Lloyd. After taking over for Sean Miller, he had a fantastic roster. And listen, they played fantastic throughout the entire season and Pac-12 play, and they were a number one seed in the NCAA tournament. But it's a big year for Lloyd to see what he's truly made of, as he's lost a lot of players and now is continuing to build his own culture out in Arizona. At 21, I have the Dayton Flyers from the Atlantic 10. It's going to be another big year for Anthony Grant and Dayton. Deron Holmes is easily the best player in the Atlantic 10 and probably is the best player in the A10 since Obi Toppin was at Dayton just a few years ago. This team is young and loves to shoot the basketball from beyond the arc. Malachi Smith and Kobe Elvis are two fantastic guards who can shoot the ball very well. RJ Blakely and Tamari Kamara will be paired with Holmes down low. It will be a fantastic year for Dayton in Ohio yet again, and they should return to the NCAA tournament. This is probably one of the best starting lineups the A10 has seen. You could look at that 2020 season with Dayton, of course, number 4 seed, or they were supposed to be a number 1 overall seed, likely to rank number 4 in the country when COVID struck. This is probably the best roster we've seen in the A10 since then. At 22, we have UConn. UConn's a difficult team to figure out, but I do trust in Danny Hurley. They lost so many players from a year ago, but returned the preseason Big East Player of the Year in Adam Sanogo. They also bring back Andre Jackson and Jordan Hawkins as well. They also brought in a few transfers as well. Tristan Newton from East Carolina. He'll probably be their point guard, him and or Andre Jackson. And then they also have a few other transfers as well. Alex Caravan will be a freshman who should make a big impact for UConn. But listen, the more I read about UConn, the more I listen about UConn. There's some people who are really high on UConn and others who are not high on this team at all. But listen, I really trust in Danny Hurley. I think he's a fantastic coach in the Big East. So I really am interested to see what the Huskies do this year. At number 23, it's the Virginia Cavaliers. Virginia at times looked like a pretty good team, looked like they were going to be an NCAA tournament team a year ago. They ended up going to the NIT, and they fell in the quarterfinal to St. Bonaventure. They didn't look great at times, but they bring back every single player from last year's team and got better, bringing in Ben Vanderplas, who was huge for Ohio the last few years. He played a big role for the Ohio Bobcats when they beat Virginia, ironically enough, in the NCAA tournament 2 years ago, but it's the same starting five for Virginia as it'll be Kihei Clark, who it feels like is in his 10th year in college, but he'll be back with Reese Beekman, Armand Franklin, Jaden Gardner, and Caden Shredrick. Just an old group, a veteran group for Tony Bennett. Will be back for Virginia. It'll be a big year for Virginia in Charlottesville. Yet again, at 24, I have Wyoming. And what a program Jeff Linder has built in just 3 years. Hunter Maldonado and Graham Ike are my favorite point guard and center duo in the entire country. I'm really excited to see what Wyoming could do this year. And while they do bring back a lot of players, they also added a lot of players. 3 Pac-12 transfers, 1 from UCLA and Jake Kyman, and 2 from USC. Max Agbankpolo and Ethan Anderson are headed to Wyoming from USC. I have them finishing second in the Mountain West. It should be a good year in Wyoming. And rounding out my top 25 at number 25 is Texas A&M. What a disappointing end to last season for Texas A&M. A lot of people believed that they should have been in the NCAA tournament. They weren't. They went to the NIT. They lost in the NIT championship just with a few seconds left to Xavier, but they bring everyone back. So this should be a tournament team. One player to watch for this season for Texas A&M is Julius Marble. He will likely be A&M's starting center. He was a starting center for Michigan State for a few years. I really like him, especially on the defensive end. I think it'll be very interesting to see how he plays for Texas A&M. So that is the TWSN preseason top 25. We'll be doing this every single week on all of our social media platforms. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, you name it, we are on it. And we're really looking forward to this college basketball season. So thanks so much. I'm Tom Seipp, and stay tuned for a lot more college basketball content to come throughout this entire season.